Welcome to a talk with Robert J. Caron of Caron Law Office in Providence, Rhode Island. In this video series, Attorney Caron will discuss some of his primary areas of practice, which include criminal law, family law, commercial fishery, personal injury, civil rights violations, and criminal record expungement.
Another area of practice that I've developed over the years is representing commercial fishermen. And it's an area of the law that I never really considered that I would get into early on, but just kind of fell upon me, and it kind of came out of a criminal context. And I got to tell you, this one commercial fisherman who was my first client in this area has since deceased. He was a big burly guy, died of a heart attack. Unfortunate, a real character. And what happened with him was that he had been out on his trawler, maybe a 40-foot trawler, like many of these gentlemen use. They're old vessels, oftentimes from the 20s and 30s, wooden vessels with gear that just needs to be constantly repaired and maintained. Unfortunately, oftentimes they can't afford insurance. They're uninsured. They're out there in dangerous conditions, trying to make a living. And you know, sometimes, especially when you're trawling, you're catching a whole variety of species of fish. Ground fish, maybe anything from fluke. You may catch some summer flounder, tatar. You may catch lobsters in your nets as well, and you've got to deal with the myriad of DEM regulations that deal with how much of a certain type of fish you can have on a given day, what the size restrictions are, and you got to cull through this stuff. And you know, you're supposed to do the right thing as best you can. Sometimes it may seem to these commercial guys that the authorities in this area can be rather heavy-handed in their tactics. Going back to this first client that I had, he had been out fishing for the day, and part of his, what they sometimes call bycatch, that is, he had lobsters. He had a couple of coolers worth of lobsters, and this was a local town that he would stop in the local, bar where he had some friends and unload some lobsters. And what happened here was there was someone that had a license to sell retail seafood, and they didn't like that this gentleman was selling some lobsters out of his truck. And in fairness, maybe he didn't have a license to sell out of his truck. But the point of the story was that law enforcement officials from DEM followed him to a restaurant and stopped him and told him that they were going to, that they wanted to check inside his coolers to see what he had. And this gentleman, and to protect his dignity and his identity, there's no need to use his name, but he said something to the effect of, "That's fine. You know, I'll be here having a bite to eat and a couple of beers. Don't waste your time in obtaining a warrant. If you can, get it here before I leave, then by all means." And not surprisingly, this did not sit well with law enforcement. And next thing you know, they just took it upon themselves to go into his coolers, search all of these coolers that he had, measure every one of the lobsters, and there were some that were undersized. And he was charged with possession of undersized lobsters. We went to a full suppression hearing, and the district court judge agreed with us that they just did not have probable cause to go into this man's coolers and check to see what it was that he had. It was a violation of his constitutional rights under the Fourth Amendment, and all that evidence was thrown out. In any event, from there, I took on a myriad of pretty complex litigation related to Rhode Island fisheries and regulations that have been passed over the years. Some we won with great effort, and others, we did not win, but not for failing to try. And one of those cases was one of my petitions for certiorari to the United States Supreme Court, where I am licensed to practice. But one of the ones that we did win, and it is still on the books, is State versus Patterson. And in State versus Patterson, what was happening was DEM had a regulation that said to the commercial fishermen that during, I think it was fluke season, when you're coming in and you're about to offload your catch on the docks, you need to radio in and let us know exactly how much weight you have. Well, the problem with that was if you could only have, say, 100 pounds of fluke or summer flounder on that day, and you happen to have 125 pounds, you would, in essence, be calling up DEM and incriminating yourself by letting them know that you were in violation of the regulations. It would be no different, as we argued in the Newport Superior Court, it would be no different than saying to the state police, I'll be coming through Rhode Island with 2 or 3 pounds of marijuana, just to let you know, and I'll be driving such and such a vehicle. Then maybe that's a bit of a cheeky example, but indeed we got that regulation struck down for being violative of the Fifth Amendment. In fact, what it did was it compelled someone to incriminate themselves potentially, and I'm very proud of that case as well. It's hard work. I admire these guys. They're quite a breed. These fishermen in Rhode Island. I've loved representing them. I've met so many good guys in this area. And what ends up happening is, with all of these regulations, they can charge you criminally, or they can move against you administratively. And oftentimes it's a criminal charge. It's a misdemeanor charge. So here you are, commercial fishermen. It's a tough way to make a living. You're regulated to death, and next thing you know, you find yourself being named defendant in state versus whoever it may be, because you've got an oversized tautog or something. So they can be heavy-handed with those prosecutions. I'm here for you if you get charged with anything like that. And ultimately, it can affect your commercial license, your ability to fish commercially. And those licenses are difficult to come by, unfortunately. We challenged that in state versus in Riley versus DEM. And Riley was a situation where a gentleman in Rhode Island, I forget what he had done for a living. I think he was an engineer or something. He had some serious profession, but always wanted to be a fisherman. And he was well into his 40s, and he applied for a commercial fishing license through DEM. And DEM said, no, sorry, there's a moratorium on fishing licenses. We can't give you that valuable multi-species fishing license because there's a moratorium. We're not giving out any more. We can give you an entry-level fishing license where you could fish for basically fish of no value, but you can't fish for the valuable fish. And the argument that we made was, well, wait a minute, you can set daily fishing quotas, limits, we understand that, but you can't say who can get out there and compete for the resource. Essentially what we were saying is, let the market control itself, let people get out there and compete if they want to invest in fishing gear, issue them the license. If there's not enough resource, i.e. fluke or bass or tautog, whatever it may be, or lobster, then the industry will work itself out, and those that can't compete or are unable to compete will move into other areas. But our Supreme Court saw that differently, and they upheld DEM's ability to limit license entry. And of course, some of these gentlemen, commercial fishermen, and I respect them all, Many of them were very pleased with that decision because, of course, there are those out there that are the haves. They have the commercial license. They can compete for the resource. They're already burdened enough with the regulations. They didn't want new participants coming in. But really, to a lot of their credit, there were guys that supported the initiative and said, hey, you should be able to get a license and compete if you can as well. So it's an issue that I have really, or an area of law that I have really become very familiar with through DEM's regulations, and it kind of dovetails into that criminal setting too, when unfortunately these guys, for the most part, are being charged and being made criminals out of some things that may seem quite heavy-handed in an objective analysis. So if you have a situation where your license is threatened, you're being charged with a failure to register your boat in Rhode Island. That's another case that I won that essentially said, you know, if you already have it registered on the federal registration, then the state can't come in and force you to register too. But you know what? They're still doing it, even though we won that case. So it's complicated stuff at times, but I enjoy it. And if you find yourself being charged with any administrative violation, administratively within the administrative adjudication court for DEM, or in the district court for any number of violations, give me a call. We'll sit down and talk about it, and we'll see what we can do.